Before the dawn of man, long before the first human walked upon the earth, long before cities rose or languages were spoken, the world was alive with beings that have now vanished into silence. The land stretched wide, untouched by human hands, its mountains taller than memory and its seas deeper than imagination. Forests unlike any known today reached toward the skies, their leaves broad and glowing under the warmth of a sun that shone upon an earth still young and restless. Rivers carried not only water, but secrets, flowing through valleys that echoed with the cries of creatures never recorded in human history. In this forgotten age, the rulers of the world were not men. They were mysterious creatures whose presence shaped the balance of life. They lived in forms strange to the eyes of those who would come later. Some walked on limbs like pillars, each step shaking the ground beneath them. Others swam in the seas, their bodies moving with silent grace, their eyes reflecting the dim light of the ocean's depths. Still others filled the skies with shadows, their wings vast enough to blot out the rising moon. The earth itself seemed to bend to their existence. Forests grew where they grazed, rivers changed course where they passed, and the winds shifted with the patterns of their flight. They were not beasts without reason. They were not mindless wanderers. They lived by laws written deep within nature, laws older than humankind, and they ruled not through violence, but through balance. Among these rulers there were giants whose skin shone like stone, polished by centuries of rain. They walked slowly, but their patience was their power. In their presence, smaller creatures thrived, for they altered the land in ways that nourished everything around them. When they pulled down branches, they cleared space for sunlight to reach the ground. When they drank from rivers, their movements carved new pools where life could flourish. In the skies soared another kind of creature. Their wings stretched wide as sails, catching the winds that circled the earth. They glided above mountains and oceans, their cries sharp as lightning splitting the sky. Some fed on fish that leapt from the waters. Others carried seeds in their beaks, scattering them far across the land, spreading forests that would outlast even their own kind. They were masters of the air, yet their lives were tied to the rhythm of the earth below. The seas, too, had their rulers. Vast and endless, the oceans were kingdoms of beings that shimmered with light from within. Some were larger than any ship that humans would one day build. They swam with grace, their movements stirring currents that touched every corner of the sea. Schools of smaller creatures followed them, finding protection in their shadows. The rulers of the sea commanded not through fear, but through the harmony of their existence, keeping balance in the waters that covered most of the earth. But what made these creatures truly mysterious was not only their form or size. It was the sense of order they carried within them. They did not destroy the world they lived in. They shaped it, nurtured it, and passed it on to the generations that followed. They had no need for monuments of stone or weapons of iron, for their very existence was their legacy. Legends whisper that some among them possessed a kind of awareness beyond simple survival. They moved in patterns that spoke of design. They gathered in groups not only to hunt or to mate, but to perform movements that seemed like rituals. Some say they communicated with sounds that echoed through valleys and seas, messages carried not only by voice, but by the vibrations of the earth itself. Whether these tales are truth or myth, none can deny that their rule left marks upon the world too deep to erase. As time moved on, the earth changed. The land shifted, mountains rose and crumbled, seas grew and retreated, and climates turned from warmth to cold and back again. Many of the rulers adapted, their forms changing slowly across ages. Others could not withstand the changes and faded into extinction, their bones buried in silence. Yet traces of them remain, fossils in stone, whispers in myths, and imprints in the memory of the earth itself remind us that long before Adam, long before humankind began its story, the world belonged to mysterious rulers who walked, swam, and flew in realms beyond imagination. And so begins the tale of those forgotten sovereigns. A tale not of kings in crowns or warriors with swords, but of creatures who ruled by the laws of nature. Their kingdom was the earth itself, and their reigns stretched across ages measured not in years, but in the slow heartbeat of creation. This is their story, the story of the world before Adam, when mysterious creatures ruled the earth, the silent kingdom. The rulers of the ancient world did not live in isolation. Their existence was tied to the rhythm of the earth itself. Every sunrise and sunset guided their movements, and every season brought change that shaped their survival. The forests, oceans, deserts, and mountains were not only their homes, but their kingdoms. Each creature played its role, and together they created a harmony that allowed life to flourish long before the thought of humankind entered the story of creation. In the highlands of the early earth, enormous plant-eating giants roamed. Their bodies were built like moving fortresses, their skin layered with rough scales that shielded them from the harsh winds and predators of the time. Their long necks allowed them to feed on the highest leaves of trees that towered like pillars. Wherever they walked, the ground trembled under their weight. Yet they were gentle rulers, shaping the land not by destruction but by presence. They opened clearings where sunlight touched the earth, allowing smaller plants to grow, feeding countless other creatures. Predators also ruled these lands, creatures swift and cunning. They hunted with precision, their eyes sharp, their senses alert to the slightest movement. Their strength was not only in their claws and teeth, but in their intelligence. They worked together, surrounding prey with strategies passed down through generations. Some would chase, others would wait in silence, and together they would strike with unity. These predators kept the balance of the silent kingdom, ensuring that no single species grew beyond control. In the rivers and lakes lived beings of remarkable design. Some were armored with plates of bone, protecting them from enemies above and below. Others glided with smooth bodies, their movements more like flowing water than living flesh. They fed on fish, plants, and even the smaller rulers of the water. At times they emerged onto land, dragging themselves slowly across muddy banks, leaving marks that the earth still remembers. Above all this, the skies were alive with wings. The air itself was a kingdom ruled by flight. Great creatures soared with wings that spread wider than the tallest trees. Some hunted in the waters, diving with unmatched speed. Others fed on the land, searching far and wide for food. There were even creatures whose wings glowed faintly in the night sky, drawing smaller beings toward them. To the early earth, the sky was never silent. Every dawn began with the cries of rulers of the air, voices that carried across mountains and seas, but the most mysterious of all were the creatures of the deep oceans. Unlike those on land or in the air, the rulers of the sea were hidden from the sight of all. They lived in darkness, where sunlight could not reach, and their bodies adapted to that eternal night. Some produced light from within, glowing like lanterns drifting through the water. Others were massive, their forms stretching longer than the forests on land. They moved slowly, carrying entire ecosystems on their bodies. Smaller fish and plants clung to their scales, living and dying with their host. In silence and secrecy, they ruled the greatest kingdom of all, for the seas covered most of the earth. Life in this age was not simple. It was a delicate balance. The rise of one species often meant the decline of another. The rulers had to adapt constantly, for the world itself was restless. Volcanoes erupted, pouring rivers of fire across valleys. Earthquakes split the land, creating canyons and mountains. Ice spread in waves, freezing entire regions, while elsewhere heat burned through deserts and plains. Each change tested the rulers, and only the most adaptable survived. It is said that some of these creatures carried a wisdom unknown to later generations. They did not build homes of stone or tools of metal, but their behavior suggested patterns of thought and memory. Some gathered in circles, moving together in ways that seemed like rituals. Others protected their dead, covering them with leaves or stones, as if to mark the place of passing. Such actions hint at a form of awareness deeper than instinct, a silent knowledge shared among the rulers of the earth. As time passed, these mysterious creatures spread across every corner of the planet. They filled the forests with sound, the oceans with movement, and the skies with shadow. Their rule was not marked by conquest, but by survival. They did not seek to dominate for power's sake, but simply to live in balance with the world that gave them life. And in their reign, the earth itself thrived, yet even in their strength change was always near. The earth never remained still. Storms grew harsher, climates shifted, and lands that once flourished became barren. Some creatures vanished forever, leaving only bones buried in stone. Others adapted, growing stronger and wiser with each generation. The silent kingdom was never eternal, for no rule in creation lasts forever. Still, the memory of those mysterious beings remains. Long before Adam, before humankind began its journey, these rulers shaped the earth into what it would become. Their mark is hidden in fossils, carved into mountains, and whispered in the stories of nature itself. Their silence today is only the echo of a reign that once stretched across the ages, the age of shadows. The world was never still in those ancient times. Each age brought with it new rulers, new challenges, and new mysteries. The silent kingdom gave way to what some call the age of shadows, for the skies, seas, and lands grew darker with change. The earth trembled more often, storms became violent, and survival demanded more than strength. Only the most adaptable creatures could endure, and among them rose rulers whose powers shaped the destiny of the planet. In the great forests, the light of the sun could barely reach the ground. Towering trees blocked the skies, their branches woven together like walls of a fortress. Within this darkness lived hunters who ruled through silence. Their bodies were lean and swift, their senses sharper than any blade. They moved without sound, striking with speed that prey could not escape. Their glowing eyes pierced the gloom, warning all that the shadows belonged to them. The balance of the forest shifted, for fear itself became a tool of rule. Beneath the mountains, deep caverns stretched farther than rivers. Here lived creatures that never saw the sun. Their bodies were pale, their eyes blind, yet their other senses reached far beyond what daylight creatures could imagine. They could hear the vibration of water dripping from stone and feel the heartbeat of those who entered their domain. Some grew to massive size, feeding on the slow life of the underground. Others lived in colonies, moving as one, their unity making them powerful beyond their fragile appearance. They ruled a kingdom of eternal night, unseen but strong. Across the plains roamed creatures that lived in herds, so vast they darkened the horizon. Their hooves shook the ground like thunder. They were not predators, yet their strength was in their unity. Together they defended their young. Together they moved across deserts. Together they faced storms. The rulers of the plains proved that survival was not always about claw and tooth, but about loyalty and order. The seas during this age grew colder. Great ice sheets formed in the north and south, trapping entire regions beneath frozen silence. Yet even in this harshness, mysterious beings ruled. Some carried warmth within their bodies, glowing faintly as they cut through freezing waters. Others were armored with shells, thick as stone, their forms able to withstand the crushing weight of the deep. The largest of them sang songs that echoed through the oceans, their voices carrying across thousands of miles. These songs were more than calls. They were messages guiding others, uniting distant creatures into one great harmony. In the skies, a new kind of ruler appeared. They were not the largest of flyers, yet their intelligence made them powerful. They soared together in flocks, their movements so precise that they looked like shadows dancing across the clouds. They hunted as one, turning and diving with perfect unity. Some even learned to steal food from larger flyers, using wit instead of strength. In their cunning and coordination lay the seeds of a rule that would last for ages. But this age was not only about survival. Evidence suggests that many of these rulers began to display behaviors that reached beyond instinct. Some gathered in specific places year after year, leaving behind patterns etched into stone and earth. Others used objects found in nature, carrying them for reasons unknown. Whether these actions were rituals or forms of memory, they reveal that the rulers of the Age of Shadows were more than beasts. They were guardians of knowledge, written not in words, but in behavior and tradition. The world itself seemed to test them. Volcanoes covered the skies with ash, turning day into night. Floods drowned entire valleys, and earthquakes swallowed forests whole. Many creatures perished, but those who survived grew stronger and wiser. The rulers of this time carried the scars of the earth itself upon their bodies, marks of fire, ice, and stone. Some say that the age of shadows was the final preparation before the arrival of humankind. It was as if the earth was shaping its rulers, giving them knowledge and strength, only to pass it on to those who would one day walk upright and speak in words. The mysterious creatures of this age lived with purpose, and though their voices are gone, their memory lingers in the rocks, the fossils, and the myths that still whisper of them. They remind us that before Adam, before the story of humanity, there was a story of rulers unlike any we know today. Creatures of the forest, the sea, the sky, and the earth below lived and reigned in balance with the world, teaching through their existence that power is not only in strength, but also in patience, unity, and wisdom. The passing of the rulers, every reign eventually comes to an end. The mysterious creatures that once ruled the earth lived in harmony with the world for countless ages, yet even they could not escape the law of change. The earth itself was the greatest ruler of all, and its power reshaped life with every passing age. What had once been fertile became barren. What had once been warm became frozen. What had once been seas became deserts. And in these endless shifts, the rulers of the ancient world began to fade. Many perished in silence, their bodies buried beneath layers of stone and sand. Some were trapped by sudden floods, their bones carried far away by rushing waters. Others were caught in firestorms, when mountains exploded with molten rock. Whole herds disappeared when the climate grew colder and food became scarce. The songs of the ocean rulers grew weaker, fading as the seas changed around them. The skies that once shook with wings grew still as flyers vanished into the memory of time. Yet even in their decline, these creatures left behind more than fossils. They left signs of wisdom, patterns carved into the earth, and stories written not with words but with their very existence. Their ways of survival, their unity, their patience, and their rituals echoed in the fabric of creation. The world remembered them, even as their bodies turned to stone. Some of their memory passed into the whispers of later generations. Humans, when they first walked the earth, found traces of beings greater than themselves. Bones longer than their huts, skulls larger than any beast they had ever seen, and carvings left in places of silence. They wondered at these discoveries, and in their wonder they created stories. Myths of giants who once walked the land, of winged rulers who covered the sun, of ocean lords who sang to the waves. These were not empty tales. They were the echoes of truth, the memories of creatures who truly ruled before Adam. The end of the mysterious rulers was not a single moment. It came in waves spread across ages. Some vanished millions of years before others. Some clung to survival in hidden corners of the world, only to fade when the earth shifted again. What remained of them was absorbed into the soil, into the stone, into the air itself. The forests they shaped, the rivers they carved, and the winds they stirred continued long after their reign had ended. In time, new creatures rose. Among them was humankind. Small at first, fragile compared to the giants of the past, yet gifted with a power unlike any other, the ability to think, to imagine, to remember, and to create. Humans inherited a world shaped by the rulers before them. They walked on lands cleared by giants, drank from rivers carved by ancient herds, and built shelters in caves once guarded by beasts of shadow. Though humankind became the new rulers of the earth, the memory of the ancient ones never disappeared. In every culture, in every land, there are tales of those who came before. Myths of serpents that circled the seas, of winged beings that blotted out the sky, of guardians of the underworld who lived in darkness. These myths are not accidents. They are the fragments of a truth too old to be fully remembered, yet too powerful to be forgotten. And so, the story of the earth is not only the story of man. It is also the story of those who came before. Beings who ruled without cities, without weapons, without words, yet whose reign shaped the very ground beneath our feet. They remind us that power is not always in conquest. Sometimes it is in harmony. Sometimes it is in balance. Sometimes it is in patience. The age of Adam would begin, and with it a new chapter of creation. But before Adam, the earth was already alive, with rulers whose mystery still lingers in the stones, the seas, and the skies. Their passing was not the end, but the beginning of a story that continues with us today.